submitted for conservation these two bird lists. We found them at the Awbury Arboretum, which I should briefly mention. Was founded in 1916, and it's actually not a part of Fairmount Park. It's owned and operated by the City Parks Association. So Awbury itself is 50 acres of rolling hills and woods and fields and landscaping. And these two bird lists, which were written in 1926 and 1927, were found in the attic of one of those houses, and they were in deplorable condition. I received them in a box. Here you go, Alex. What can you do with these? We don't know who actually wrote them, but they're inventories of birds that were seen in 1926 and 7, not just at Awbury, but in surrounding communities and even actually other states. I would be thrilled if it was framed, digitized, and put on display. And also it'd be great to have the before and after, so that people not only see the history of Awbury, and also, by the way, the history of the community's value in Awbury as a place to research and appreciate and understand nature.
So back here is our bagging table, and I'll explain a little bit about the history of Share first, but this is our object. So Share started in 1986, and Savannah has been there since 1989. And Share is a community resource and food distribution center, and we're basically all about food. So we grow food, we distribute it, we pack it. We have a lot of people and food in and out of our warehouse. So this object, our bagging table, is essential for what we do every day. We deal with about 2,000 volunteers a month, just to give you a general understanding. We only have about 8 staff, so most of the work that we do is completed by volunteers. So these bagging tables are crucial because what we do is we get produce in bulk, and then we have our volunteers sort out the produce into however much we need for each pack. Even last week, we have a group of adults who are mentally and physically challenged, and just how much like their faces light up being around that bagging table and being able to be so, it doesn't matter what your mental capacity is or what you're able to do physically. We had a guy in a wheelchair who was sorting bags and putting them in boxes, so it was really amazing to see how happy they were doing it and how much of an impact that it had.
So the notebook has been around since 1994, but it wasn't until 2002 that the notebook went on the web, and so all the content of the notebook, 29 editions, which is this pile of editions here. So we had these old editions that were deteriorating in the office. We did our best to try to preserve them, but they were turning brown, and I'm passing one around. The one that's being passed around is the second edition ever. The notebook started out as a quarterly publication. It now comes out 6 times a year. We still print it, in addition to having a website that is updated daily. And most of the news gathering that we do act like we're like 2 publications in one, in the sense that each edition has a theme to it and is a major project, in addition to every day writing on the web the news of the day in the school district. So we really were very happy to be able to preserve these original edition, the first 29 notebooks that were put out.
First, I'd like to tell you a little bit about the Refuge. We're at 12th and Lombard Streets in Center City. We've been there since 1874. Today there are fewer and fewer options for stray and unwanted animals, so we're committed to be there for all animals that need shelter. When our founder, Elizabeth Morris, opened the doors of the Morris Animal Refuge in 1874, it was the first animal shelter in the nation. It was historic in this regard, so it was acclaimed nationally, and it became a model for humane shelters worldwide. Our original charter was drafted in 1889, and that's what you see up here. It really, to us, it represents really the start of the humane movement in the United States. And also it reflects the dedication of Elizabeth Morris and really the start of the humane movement. This all took place in Philadelphia, which really starts with ideals of equality and independence. And it seems only natural that it would also include, besides human rights, the rights of animals. So that's, for those reasons, we decided that our charter should be the object to be conserved.
It's hard to talk about a Bible if you're a Christian, because the Bible has been used to hurt people. It's also been used to heal.
This could really hurt somebody.
That could hurt someone, yeah. Evangelizing, that was. So, honing in on what the Bible is a challenge. It's a book that has existed for thousands of years and has inspired, Shakespeare and music and movies, and ultimately, hopefully, it has inspired or brought healing or guidance or discipline to us as individuals, and that's what we say it is at the West Kensington Ministry. It's meant to unite and not divide. It's meant to include and not exclude. I'm the pastor of the West Kensington Ministry. When I got there 8 years ago, it was pretty much closed, no worshiping community, and just like this Bible, we were falling apart and in disrepair and needed some help. And now we have a group of people that live in the neighborhood and that have owned the church, and just, this is very symbolic for us, because just like this has been repaired and we got some help. The world isn't all gloom and doom when people show up to help you. So thanks, Robert, and everybody else who had a hand in us being here. But just like this Bible being restored in a sense, so is our ministry.
We're a 27-year-old public interest folk life organization in West Philadelphia. There's about a dozen groups like us around the country. We think that the variety and the diversity of folk and traditional arts, of the kind of cultural traditions that people have in a community, are a real sign of vitality in our communities. We think of folk arts as, you can think of the official systems that are around. We think of folk arts as the unofficial systems that people make and share themselves. This piece was done by a man named Zheng Lian Bin. He was one of 52 Fujianese immigrants that was detained in a York County prison for nearly 4 years after the boat that he and others were on, the Golden Venture, went aground in New York Harbor. He and others turned to traditional paper folding as a way to tell their story and to raise money to pay their legal fees as they were fighting deportation. So there's thousands of folk traditions in this city. It's a privilege for the Folklore Project to work in collaboration with diverse groups to try to help people keep these traditions alive as a source of strength, really, for all of us.
So our article over here, or object, is our flag. And so the Addict Youth Center has been around for almost 20 years. And we are a social service agency supporting lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, questioning, and queer youth, between the ages of 14 and 23. The idea is really to have a safe place for them to socialize, get involved in counseling and programming that really helps to enrich their lives and develop into healthy, civic-minded individuals. In 1997, this particular flag was presented to the executive director, who's also the founder, as a gift. It was her 40th birthday, and they really wanted to celebrate her and all that she had given to the agency. And so the idea was the flag, the gay flag, represents gay and lesbian community. In this particular flag, you'll also see triangles on the flag. And so many, many years ago, Nazis used to use triangles pointed down to identify homosexuals who were supposed to be terminated, right? And so gay community kind of took that symbol back and turned the triangle up as a sign of liberation. And so that's partly what's on the flag as well here. Over the years, we've adopted a new slogan, which really just Addict Youth Center is very, not to sound corny, but youth-centered, in terms of we are always looking to see what the youth need and how to best represent who they are. So now pretty much our slogan is okay to be you. I feel like over the years, the young people realized they weren't alone, and now they really wanted to celebrate who they are.
What we do is we advocate for better lives and life chances for children here in southeastern Pennsylvania. We do that by advocating for better opportunities in education, healthcare, hunger issues, and early childhood education issues. Now, the object that we chose is actually something that's very small. To some, you may take it for granted, and some people here may even have it in their wallet right now. This is a student trans pass. It's given out every month, and for many people it ends up in the garbage at the end of the month. But for us, it represents so much more. And in today's day and age, we have so many children who don't just walk down the street to school. They walk many miles, many blocks, and in some cases from one side of the city to the other just to get an education. Yeah, you see some hands down here. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah, exactly. We found that kids couldn't get to school, and it had nothing to do with kids not wanting to go to school, but more to do with the fact that they simply couldn't get there. And at the time, they couldn't afford to take SEPTA and pay the same rates that us adults pay.
This object has a real importance for the staff and the board members and volunteers of the organization, because what we do is political advocacy, and it doesn't really involve much that is physically tangible. We don't really provide services. We don't do very much that actually builds things that is physically tangible. We try to change people's minds. It's hard sometimes for us as volunteers and as staff members to recognize that we do occasionally have wins for kids. And what this is going to do is remind all of us who work all the time on these issues for children that when we're trying to change people's minds, we occasionally do actually succeed, and it's worth carrying on the fight. So that is the kind of reminder this physical object will be for us.
Spiral Q began in '96, and the work we do is we use art to help communities, individuals tell stories about what's important to them. And that can mean stories that are very personal and stories that are very explicitly political. A lot of the work we do is giant, as this puppet here in front of me. Sometimes it's in the form of banners and flags. Sometimes the work is really working with a group to organize a parade or festival, and they may make art themselves. It really depends with or without our support in terms of that. This particular puppet that we've brought is a matador, and we brought it, we have a collection of, I don't know, maybe 2,000 or so puppets that have been made with groups all over the city in the last 16 years, I think. And so choosing one was very difficult. So one, we chose one that was ambitious because we knew we needed a hand with it. Two, we chose one that represents the sort of courage to do what you need to do when you need to do it. And so this matador was commissioned initially, as I understand it, by the Mexican consulate for a festival of some sort. And but before this puppet was delivered and used for that purpose, he was appropriated for a protest to challenge Nike's practices in manufacturing practices in Latin America. And so once he was used for that protest, the consulate said, no thank you, we can't use him now. And so we did not get paid for it, and we kept him. But that's the choice that we want to make when we need to make it, right? Is to work with communities to make the hard choices, and sometimes forego really critical resources in the fight for what's right. And that's what the people who work with us are frequently doing. They're taking tremendous risk to speak, you could say truth to power, to speak about what's important to them, and to speak in the face of sometimes a dominant culture that may not value who they are, what they have to say, or how they like to represent themselves.
And the object that we selected is the Journal of Wei Chen. Wei Chen was a student in South Philadelphia High School in 2009. And I don't know if folks here know or remember what was going on back then, but on December 3rd, 2009, over 24 Asian immigrant students at South Philadelphia High School were assaulted by their peers. And these assaults happened over the course of the day, starting at 8 in the morning, continuing through lunchtime into the after-school hours, so that these beatings and assaults were allowed to go on, essentially by adults who are responsible for the school. This journal shows him recording, so-and-so was beaten in the bathroom today, right? Or I met with the principal, or I was beaten today, right? So this is a record of what was going on in that school, and it's a record of a young man that was being very conscientious about the need to document the story of what was happening. And this journal became then evidence that was used by the Department of Justice when they did an investigation and later found that the school district had violated the civil rights of Asian immigrant students and that had acted with deliberate indifference towards the violence and harassment that they were facing. Asian Americans United has worked for 28 years building the leadership of young people and also sort of building a tradition of Asian people standing up as outspoken advocates on our own behalf. And so when you see something like this boycott, also it's, you know, decades of investment in young leadership and in people learning how to go about building effective campaigns for change.